Three opening, one response, 30 seconds rebuttal, and 2 minutes closing.
Everyone wants to say no rebuttal. Raise your hand.
Well,
I have cards for questions too.
I have 8. So it was 3, 2.
it's 3-1-2.
3-1-2.
Hello everyone, and thank you very much for coming to this Tompkins County Legislature District 6 candidate forum. My original background was in theater, so I should wait 10 minutes to start, but this isn't theater, so we'll start now, on time. The two candidates running to represent most of the town of Lansing outside of the village are the incumbent, Mike Ziegler, and the challenger, Michael Plinka-Lair, both of whom have been on the county legislature before. Now, I'm Dan Wiener. I'm going to change my name to Mike. I'm the publisher and editor of the Lansing Star, and I will be your moderator. Questions have been submitted over the past couple of weeks online on the Lansing Star, and I have a whole bunch of them printed out. And we also have Carrie Plinka-Lair and Deb Munson, who have each one representing one of the two candidates. They have blank index cards. Blank means that they're nonpartisan until you write on them. And I'm asking everyone to use your best handwriting.
Or printing.
Or that, yes. Please, best penmanship, let's say. Otherwise, your question may not come out of my mouth the same way it went out to the board. The League of Women's Voters has been kind enough to share their guidelines with us, and we will be using them tonight. And essentially, what that means is that we're going to begin with 3-minute opening statements. Candidates will each have 1 minute to answer a question, and then if a candidate wants to rebut, they'll have 30 seconds and 2 minutes closing. We also have a timer, and the league specifies that the timer have 3 signs. One is the 1-minute sign, one is the 30-second sign, and the last one is the stop sign. Is there a deputy in the house? Because if they run the stop sign, they should get a ticket. All right. I'd like it very much if you could hold your applause, your cheers, your boos, any kind of crowd noise until the very end. But during it, you should suffer my question asking and enjoy the candidate's question answering. So, do you have a question?
Do we hand these in now?
Oh, yeah, they'll correct you. The 2 mics, really, if I change my name, we've got 6 mics here, right?
Right.
The 2 mics flipped a coin, and Mike Ziegler will make his opening statement first.
Okay. Well, first off, I want to thank you all for coming. I mean, it's a rainy night, but you made your way out here. And, after this, please go, Crossroads or the Roadhouse. Spend your money in Lansing. It's nice. A little background on me. I went to Northeastern University and went for journalism. Then I went to Columbia University, and from there I moved up here for my first on-air job. I was a journalist for about 10 years. Then about in 2002, Marty Lester decided to retire from the Assembly, so I decided to run for that seat. I ran against Barbara Lifton. I got 42% of the vote, starting from nowhere. Unfortunately, she got 58% of that vote, so that's fine. And she's still in that job today. From there, we decided to make our home in Lansing. The schools are excellent, as you all know. this is where we decided to set up shop, and my daughter now, she's 12 years old in 7th grade. It's remarkable to me. She started kindergarten here and was even in the, the preschools here. So from there, Todd retired. I ran for the legislature at that point against Herb Sheldon, and I was able to win that election. Then I ran against Pat Pryor, and I lost by 7 votes. That was a very close election. And then I ran against her again, and I won by a little bit over 30 votes. So I learned a lot from that experience, learned how to lose an election, learned kind of why I lost that election. Frankly, I think I became a much better legislator because of Pat Pryor. Definitely owe her a debt in that regard. Much more communicative with the town, I think, than I had been in my first term. Although I don't think I did a terrible job, I think I did definitely learn a lot from that experience and how to really get out and kind of learn the issues of the town. Right now I'm running because there are a lot of major issues that are coming to the fore. We've been lucky to have an excellent person running the county in Joe Mariana, and he is retiring, as you may know. A lot of new people are coming onto the legislature. I've been on the legislature for 8 years, not consecutively obviously, and I would like to use that experience to go forward with that. But we have the jail coming up. I've committed to not building a new jail. We just voted last night to do a lot more programs that maybe we can keep more people out of the jail and really lower the population based on the report that we had commissioned. Also the salt mine, very precious to me. My fiance's father works in the mine, her uncle works in the mine. We know a lot of people that work in this mine, and there are people that would not be too upset if that had closed. And the power plant, I've been fighting for the power plant for goodness, a decade, to keep this thing open, repowered with natural gas. I look back now, if we had repowered it with natural gas 10 years ago, that would have been that much less carbon in the atmosphere, but they've been burning coal ever since then. So I think sometimes we sacrifice, the good for the perfect. And I'm a realist in this job, and that is what I'm going to go taking forward into the legislature. So thank you again for coming.
Michael? Well, thank you, Michael, for agreeing to do this. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Dan, for moderating. You each matter, and what really matters is who will represent you on the legislature in these times. It matters a great deal. I want to just get right to the bottom line of how am I different from Mike Sigler? How can I differentiate myself? I'm a 50-year resident of Tompkins County. I delivered papers when I was 10 years old up and down University Ave in the city of Ithaca. I was in a Boy Scout troop. Stu Dean is here from my Boy Scout troop. My family moved to North Triphammer Road when I was in college. My wife and I settled down in the town of Ithaca. And then in 2008, we moved to Lansing. Why do I give you this trajectory, this little journey? Each one of you has a story. Each one of you has a journey, how you came to Lansing. And each one of us shares common values across jurisdictions, across boundaries. I've visited over 3,000 households now, and those shared values have come to the surface. I'd like to highlight 3 themes, ways that I have brought results already to Lansing. Taxes, jobs, and quality of life, which everyone wants to preserve for Lansing. Regarding taxes, I was chair of the Tompkins County Budget Committee for 4 years. I was able to convert the double-digit tax rate increases to below inflation. And that has been true ever since 2004, and Mike has supported those kinds of changes. I've also brought grants to town of Lansing, over $100,000 worth of grants, some of which have earned $15,000 a year in savings, like energy savings. This very building was insulated with one of those grants. In terms of jobs, what kinds of results have I brought? I sat on the Economic Development Committee for the town of Lansing, and I've also helped actually promote Cargill for the last 7 years, doing an economic impact analysis, helping to write a grant also for a feasibility study for cogeneration plant to decrease their electricity costs. I've also fought for the power plant, as Mike mentioned himself, that I was on the first negotiating committee for pilot. Regarding the quality of life, I actually, when I first came on the legislature, I chaired a quality of life report. That was 32 residents across the district, some of which from town of Lansing, and we measured, we defined, and we put out indicators for quality of life. Again, looking in 2000 towards 2020 to revisit that. I would say past performance is the best indicator of future results. These are just a few highlights of my background, and I do hope that you understand that there's a whole lot more on my website and some of the literature you've been sent. I ask you tonight specifically to listen carefully to the answers. It's great to have claims, but are they backed up by results? I hope that you can understand that maybe phrases like fighting for are not necessarily in the trenches doing the work to actually make things change better for Lansing. So experience, integrity, and results, that's my pledge, and that's my promise to represent you. Thank you.
Let's start with kind of overarching question. As Lansing celebrates its bicentennial, the scope of government is vastly different than it was in early days of our region. Today, we often debate the role of government in our daily lives. Can you state what the county legislature does well, does poorly, and what would be your goals to steer the county in the next 200 years? Why don't we start, Michael?
The county actually has very talented professionals working for them. I was honored to be able to be on the legislature for 12 years. I've worked with almost every single department. Over those 12 years, I chaired 11 years I chaired standing committees, and I was on every single standing committee except for facilities and infrastructure. So I had a really great opportunity to meet with department heads, meet with staff. I think that's one of the greatest assets. Some of the greatest challenges are, bottom line, taxes and dollars. How can we keep our quality of life, keep our quality services at an affordable rate? Every single door in Tompkins County practically brought this up. And I think that's some of the experience that I would bring to keep those taxes moderate, but also to keep the quality services.
I guess I just confused myself. Do you both want to answer and both have a chance to rebut? Okay, go ahead.
So when my daughter was about 2 years old, she was diagnosed with autism, and that was done by Racker Center. And very quickly, she was put into early intervention. So if you're asking me, what does the county do well? We do that well. I mean, we spent a lot of money. She had a lot of therapy. But now you have a child that is 12 years old, is at grade level, is going to be a functioning member of society, and will have a job and will have a life. And that is thankful, to Tompkins County and early intervention. So when they asked for a nurse last year in the budget, I voted for that, because that is something we do well. What do we do awful? Awful at housing. We need to clear the path for development when it comes to housing that makes sense. But we are not good at actually building housing. And there is a movement afoot to get the county more involved in building housing. I think we really need to look at that and what we do well when it comes to housing and what we do poorly. And we really need to stay away from what we do poorly, because I'm not really sure we can improve there. So, thank you.
Any rebuttal?
No, that's fine.
Okay. In this age of political polarization and disinformation, how are the candidates trying to bring the Lansing community together rather than dividing it? And how will the candidates make Lansing a better partner with the county? Mike Ziegler?
I think the best way to bring people together is to keep an open mind. I mean, the ACA came in front of the legislature this year, and a lot of people didn't know how I was going to vote on that, because frankly, I still think the ACA is not sustainable. I think that a lot of work needs to be done there. But, I got calls from citizens. I got especially one call. She's like, listen, my child relies on this. And this is why you shouldn't be rejecting this without something else that's better. And that's where I went with that. I listened to my public. I listened to the constituents. And when they come forward with an idea, great. Listen, you will never not know where I stand on an issue. And if you disagree with me, hey, give me a call. Tell me why you disagree with me. Tell me, listen, Sigler, this is this idea over here that we can do better. And this, I want to give this to you so that you can work on this. And I'm all for that. I would like to work on that. Now, if I don't think your idea is that great, I'll tell you, here's the hurdles in front of you, and this is why this won't work. But I'll always be honest with you about the hurdles and what I can do for you and what I can't.
I think this campaign is a great example of how I would unite. I have actually started the campaign with a Pride in Lansing banner, basically, I Heart Lansing, which Republicans, Independents, Democrats put up. It's a way that people already can be excited about what is good about Lansing, and we can build upon that. Other aspects in terms of going door to door, I know Mike has been going to door as well. I've gone to almost every single door in the town of Lansing already, including all across the political spectrum. And I think that even this forum, in terms of asking for the forum, I had to ask Mike 4 different times before he finally said yes. that this is a way to educate our community, bring people together, so that we can reach across those common values I spoke of earlier.
Miles?
Yes, please. First off, I said yes the first time you asked me. I have no problem with having debates. I have lots of debates. I think you have a very different view of that I Love Lansing sign than a lot of people had. I mean, when I get a call from my kid's teacher and says, yes, this sign was presented as an I Love Lansing sign, even presented as something as part of the bicentennial, and when they found out it was actually a political sign, they didn't have the warm, fuzzy feeling that I think that you thought a lot of people did. And they found it to be disingenuous, and I mean, frankly, so did I, and that's where we are with that.
I was hoping that the questions would be kind of equal out when they came in, and some of the questions were directed at a particular candidate. I hoped when that happened that there'd be just as many questions directed at the other candidate, but it didn't work out that way. It was a little bit like this. So what I've decided to do with those questions is to ask them to the candidate that they were directed at, but also give the other candidate a chance to answer. However, I'm not sure about whether they can both answer this question, so I'm going to get it off the table right away. I hear the Democrats call you Kaplinka liar. Oh, Kaplinka liar, it says. Can you explain why?
I have no idea what you're talking about, but I think that sounds like not a Democratic phrase. I think, again, this forum is for bringing out issues, and if we're going to go into personal attacks, I hope we don't go down that road.
And I'm sorry, I misread it before I said it. Michael?
No, I don't have anything to say.
Okay, great. What steps will you take to ensure that Lansing is involved in county-wide trail development and increased access to tourism grants?
So I sat on the Strategic Tourism Planning Board, and thankfully, years and years ago, probably 20 years ago, Stu Stein had a lot of vision for how that kind of fund would be funded through room tax. And so we have various pots of money, whether it's a capital fund for tourism, whether it's strategic tourism grants for celebrations, whether it's for trails or other kinds of amenities that will draw tourists here to Tompkins County. And I have a lot of experience in terms of reviewing those grants, and I certainly have assisted community organizations, whether it's nonprofit. I even have sent some of these grant openings to Town of Lansing leaders to apply for things like trails, to apply for rails to trail, to apply for infrastructure improvements regarding the environment. And so I think I have that kind of experience, and I would continue that. I have done fundraising, I've done grant writing, and I would bring that to bear here in Lansing.
I think the most important thing when it comes to this is to have a close working relationship with the town board. It's interesting that this question came up. I was doing the chicken barbecue, and somebody comes up to me, a coach here locally, and she said, listen, I'm really concerned about this development that's going in across the street because it's going to hurt our running trail. Not a county purview issue, but I have a good enough working relationship with the town supervisor that I said, hey, come on over here and listen to this. And I think they had a 20-minute chat or something like that, and I know that he's going to be in tune with that issue. Now, a really neat trail that we have that's coming online, also you should check out our trail map. It's at the county website because it tells you where all the trails are in the county now. It's pretty exciting. And that was done through our planning department. But we also have the Blue Way Trail, which is a lake trail, and you can hop in a kayak and follow this trail, and it's pretty exciting. So yes, when we look at tourism dollars and how to spend them, trails are very important, and people do seem to like them in our community, and it would be nice if our community could hook up at least into the village. Thanks.
Any rebuttals?
No, not this time. I mean, reserve it for later.
You can't add them up and have 20 minutes later.
No,
Okay, this one was addressed to Mike Sigler, so you'll answer first. In your campaign literature I received last week, you say when activists sought to close the Cargill mine, Sigler came out strongly in favor of keeping the mine open, protecting more than 200 jobs, lowering the cost of salt for the county, and avoiding the costly and environmentally damaging trucking of salt into Tompkins.
That was really well written, Dan.
The question goes on to say, please explain that the fuzzy math you used to conclude that the trucks that would be needed to haul salt into Tompkins County's salt supply would be more environmentally damaging than the hundreds of thousands of trucks which currently haul salt out of Lansing.
You have to get the salt from someplace, and I would rather it be sourced locally. I don't really know what fuzzy math you're talking about. I mean, we can only worry about what we do right here in Tompkins County. If other counties want to open their own salt mines, I guess they could do that. But for right now and right here, we get an enormous discount. It's like anything you do, when you have to haul something by truck, it's going to be more expensive if you have to haul it further away. This is not rocket science, that's simple math. And yes, we have a lower carbon footprint because we do not have to truck our salt in from Michigan or from Erie, Pennsylvania, or from farther away. So yes, we have a better system in place because we are sourcing this locally. We don't have to truck it as far, but also that's a huge expense. If this salt mine were to close, the county alone would be spending, the county would be spending $500,000 more per year. And then if you add in all the townships, that's another $500,000. That's $1 million that taxpayers are going to have to make up to close something that, frankly, is one of the best run mines in the country.
I'll actually attack a different kind of fuzzy math. The idea that 200 jobs would be lost by the kind of characterization about activists in Tompkins County or Lansing, I think, is something that does have to be rebutted. There's no way that this mine will be closing just because the shaft may not be allowed to go forward, although the permit has already been approved. But those jobs, since 1914, people have been mining under the land, and we can still mine under the land very successfully and very profitably. So I don't think that the equation of if you're against some sort of environmental impact, you're in favor of the environmental impact statement that you're going to be losing 200 jobs is a fair equation.
Buttles?
Of course, well, you should go tell the 200 miners that, because nobody believes that. I mean, you can't have, the mine is under the lake, it's not under the land. So you would be suggesting that they would have to build an entirely new shaft and an entirely new mine someplace else in Lansing, under the land. And by the way, the Red Soft mine, which people keep saying, hey, the Red Soft mine collapsed and this is what happened, that was under land. So the problem is if you hit the aquifer, then yes, it could flow into the mine. But it's not like Cargill, which is 2,300 feet, is somehow going to pop into the bottom of the lake.
Yeah, I think we have scientists who differ on this, and I would simply ask that we have a public hearing with all the information available to the public. I am one of the residents who live directly downhill from the shaft. My wife and I were most impacted. I actually supported the shaft. I am asking for more environmental oversight. And in the last analysis, I think we have disagreement of opinion, and we don't have all the information on the table. The seismic data, for instance, from Cargill is not on the table.
This is a general question for Mike Kaplinka-Layer. I read your mailer, and you seem to support everything Mike Sigler is doing and has been effectively working on, from keeping the power plant open to cutting the tax rate to fighting for the salt mine. I think he became a better legislator in part because of Pat Pryor. Why replace him?
Well, I think the bottom line of why I think I'm the better candidate is I'm proactive, not reactive. I think Mike Sigler has issues have come before him, and he responds, but he doesn't actually get in the trenches and move an agenda item forward. I've chaired, as I mentioned, committees for 11 out of 12 years. I've moved through all the issues from conception to implementation, and I think that's the kind of representative that Lansing deserves. We don't have that at this point. Mike hasn't actually chaired a committee, and I don't think that his history or his experience shows that he has moved very many agenda items forward from conception to implementation.
Bundles?
I think that's a crazy statement. I mean, if you want proactive, I'm sitting there at the school picking up my daughter, and I see all these kids crossing the road from Myers Park, and I say, wow, you cannot see those kids when you're coming down from the north. Because people are going pretty fast, they don't know they're going into a school zone. And yes, there's a lot of signs, and that seems to be what the state's decision is, like, hey, let's put up more signs. I don't know if Andrew Cuomo has another brother that makes signs, but my goodness, we have a lot of signs. So I saw the problem, I contacted all the people that needed to be contacted, they've repainted it, and they're going to be hopefully putting in a rumble strip. That's my goal.
Here's another general question for both of you. What have you accomplished in the last 4 years for Lansing people?
Is it my turn first?
It is Mike Sigler.
Every year that I've been in office, the tax rate has gone down. Now, I know a lot of people are saying, yes, but assessments have gone up. Well, that's a good thing, too. I mean, your assessment has gone up. It means your house is worth more. I understand you're paying more in taxes. And I really feel for a lot of people, some of their taxes went up a lot this year because of the reassessments. But with that said, you know, your house is worth more. The tax rate, I've been keeping that in check for the last 4 years, just as I did when I was on the legislature before that. When it comes to what have we done for the town of Lansing, as I mentioned, early intervention, that was something I voted for. When it comes to the health department and mental health, that is a very large department for us. And we decided to merge that under one umbrella, and that was a very wise decision, I think. We have Frank Krupa running that, and he has a lot on his plate. And the health department is certainly, like the Habs in the lake, we were in contact constantly about that, about how it was dangerous for people down at Salt Point. Where was it spotted? You know, and the great thing about that too, we had a lot of public input on that, like the people down at Paddle and Moore were telling us where these things are.
Well, I would also pick up on the tax rate. Again, I mentioned that when I became budget chair, it was double-digit tax increases, and I was able to change that to below inflation. How did we do that? We actually changed the entire budget process, which at the time Mike Sigler supported, to instead of a recommendation coming in very high and legislators having to whittle, we actually changed the process so the recommendation came in with department head input, with county administrator input, low, and we then had a priority setting process for people adding to the budget at that point. That transformed the budget process, and this is the result. Mike Sigler can claim he has voted for these budgets, but the actual process of making that happen, he had nothing to do with except supporting the recommendations to make that change. In terms of other areas I've been involved in town of Lansing, I've been on the community council, I've been on the bicentennial committee, I've been on the economic development committee. Again, I've written grants for the town of Lansing that are still producing results to this day to reduce your taxes.
Rebuttals?
It's not really so much a rebuttal as much as an observation. You know, it's there's not a whole lot of people in town that don't see me at events. I mean, I am out there, folks. I mean, if there's a watch fire down at the lake, I'm there. There's a great play, by the way, at the schools this week. You should go see it. It's fantastic. I mean, there are not a whole lot of events that I am not at for Lansing, and I'm a very accessible person, and that is where I get most of my ideas from you folks. So.
No rebuttal.
Okay. Got some law enforcement questions grouped together. Let's see. Okay, so one of them was addressed to Michael Katlinka-Lair, so I will start with him. Sigler has been to a number of the jail study meetings, toured the girls' facility here in Lansing twice to see if it could be incorporated into a county plan going forward. The jail...
Closer to the mic, man.
The jail is a big issue. Have you been to one of those meetings?
Back in 2004 and 2005, we had this exact same kind of issue with the New York State, from the Commission on Corrections, trying to push the removal of the waivers and asking the Tompkins County to expand the jail. We had incredible countywide debate about those kinds of issues, and it turned out that the county representatives voted for alternatives to incarceration. So I've been deeply involved in these. I was on the OAR board, which is Opportunities, Alternatives and Resources, but it used to be called Offender Aid and Restoration, transitioning people from the jail back into the community. I've worked in a juvenile justice facility here in Lansing. So in terms of, I was at the jail opening, for instance, when it opened many, many years ago. So I have plenty of experience. I have not actually been to a particular jail study committee, but I've been reading all the minutes. I get Marcia Lynches, who's the communication officer for Tompkins County, for summary of meetings. And so I think I'm well versed on not just the department heads, but the issues that this includes.
So I'm not on that committee, but I have been to a number of the meetings, and it's interesting the kind of people you get in. You realize that there really is not a political appetite for building a new jail in this community. A new jail anyway would cost about $40 million. There just is not an appetite for doing that. So with that in mind, so we are going to have to do some new things. Last night we voted to add an ADA, for example. And I'm over at the town hall today, and there's Matt Van Houten, our DA, and he's doing town court cases. That's not really what our DA is supposed to be doing. He has some pretty major cases that he needs to handle. So we voted that in. We added a new probation officer, senior probation officer, because we are going to need to put some more people on ankle bracelets to track them and find out where they are, because we have to lower this number. Jim Dennis suggested, and I suggested that we add $300,000 to the budget, because we are going to have to do more board outs. This is not going to happen overnight. We want to put fewer people in our jail. We would like to board out fewer people too, so we could see some savings. But we put that in for 3 years, and that's hopefully when we can get all this stuff done.
You want to look up yourself?
No, I'm good. Do I get 30 more seconds? That's good.
This is kind of a yes or no question. Does either candidate have the official endorsement of Sheriff Ken Lansing?
I do not.
I do not. Do I get to talk more?
You do not.
Can I rebut his statement?
Here's the next question. Do you support the principle that the county sheriff should remain an elected position, and will you pledge here tonight to resist all future efforts to move to an appointed position and strip the voters of the right to elect the sheriff? And I think Mike Sigler goes first.
I resisted it when it was brought up. I'm going to resist it now. I'm going to resist it going forward. I think that the sheriff should be in an elected position, should remain in an elected position. You know, some people are going to say, well, you're going to get somebody in there without experience. Well, perhaps. I mean, there are rules now in place to prevent that from happening. But I mean, I look at the way the department has gone. I mean, people wanted Sheriff Peter Meskel in there. Okay, he won. He was the sheriff. He grew in the job. But then along comes Ken Lansing, and he says, I can do this job better. And the people said, yes, we think you can. So they elected him. Maybe they weren't unhappy with Sheriff Meskel. Maybe they liked what he was doing. But Ken just had more people come out for him. Who knows? But the fact of the matter is, I believe that that's how you get the person most in touch, is through an election. I mean, a lot of people complain about the sheriff's department, right? And the only way to be able to really kind of say, listen, this is what we're feeling as a community about the sheriff's department, is through a direct election. So that's what I support.
Michael?
I support a direct election as well. Civic participation is one of my, core values, and I think democracy demands that we do elect as many representatives as we can. I think it is a challenge that we may not get as professional a sheriff in that particular manner. If you look across New York State, I think 52 counties have an elected sheriff, and I would support that continuation here in Tompkins County.
Do you think that Tompkins County municipalities should share more governmental services?
Yes, absolutely. I was on the Tompkins County Council of Governments, which is a way for all different municipalities, villages, towns, city, and county reps to share information, to gather experience from each other, and to work together. We did a lot of shared services even before it became a quoted fad from, the governor requiring and almost mandating shared services to try to save tax dollars. And thankfully, we are continuing to do that, being as creative as possible. Tompkins County, I think, is ahead of the curve in terms of innovation, in terms of collaboration, in terms of working across municipalities and jurisdictions. Again, I've served on those committees, I have those relationships, and I would look forward to continuing to find shared services where applicable.
I certainly think we should where we can, but I'm going to start with the good and then I'll go to the bad. So on the good side, I mean, I am so impressed with what the town did. They went out, they got this MOU with 2 other areas so that we might be able to run sewer. And sewer has been divisive in this community, but you know, the town has made a decision that, listen, we might be able to move forward this if developers are the ones that are going to be footing the bill. But it took the town to go and talk to the other municipalities to even get this on the radar, and they were able to do that. So that's the good. Some of the bad, though, is there's talk of things like, well, we want to merge the parks in the county. No, I'm not really for that. I think Myers Park is very well run. It's self-sufficient. Heck, they should come to us for consulting on how to run a park. Then we look at like the sheriff's department. Listen, we have a great sheriff's department. We benefit from that sheriff's department in this town. And the study that's coming out is saying it's going to cost the towns more if these things are to merge into the city, and the city will get a lift. Well, no, I'm not actually okay with that. I would like us to stay with what we have right now.
This seems to be an urgent question, so this will be next. It's for both candidates. How do you feel about town sewer, ASAP?
Is that for me? All right. Well, I just talked about this, but again, this is really a town issue. The county can help where it can help, and if the town comes to me and says, Mike, this is what we need from you. But I mean, there is some low-hanging fruit. I was walking down by the sailing club. There's that little sliver of Lansing, and these folks, they're on either holding tanks, which is amazing to me, and they get those pumped every so often, or they're on septic systems. And they frankly don't have the footprint. They don't have the land to build another septic system. So if theirs goes, they are out of luck. And you can see the sewer line. It's like at my house. I can see the water and I can't get it. The only reason it didn't get extended up, I think, is because it ended at the town line because they didn't have that MOU in place that the town now does. So now is the time. Maybe we can actually look. Listen, that's an extended line. The people in that area can form their own sewer. And then guess what? They are then the ratepayers. So that's how we can facilitate these things going forward. But that's not a cost on the town. The taxpayers don't have to go and foot that bill. The developers will, or the people that are in those districts will.
I agree that it's a town issue. I sat on the Economic Development Committee when the last sewer proposal was being proposed. Thankfully, Cargill offered the land. The chair of the committee worked very hard, Andy Sharaba, to get $2.7 million from the state to incentivize that. The school was at a point where they needed their septic to be increased. And unfortunately, because of, in my estimation, not going out to the public often enough. When I sat on that committee, I encouraged it at almost every meeting, and it's in the minutes, to ask the public for their input, to have forums, to look at different possible funding schemes. And I believe what happened was that people got information that it was about a 50-50 split, whether that would be voted on if it went to the public. And they decided to back away. And so we lost that potential funding, and the school ended up having to install 3 septic tanks. We all paid double. So I think the central district of Lansing could indeed benefit from a sewer. I think we can find a proposal that would work economically for those who benefit. And I look forward to helping, from the legislature point of view, the town to do that.
You have a lot of questions about the power plant and the mine. So I think we'll take a power plant and mine journey.
Closer to the mic, then.
You want me to move over there?
The mic, not those mics.
I'm just going to go in the order that I can find them. It's random order here. So to Mike Plinkalaire, you said you were proud progressive and are running as such. The Tompkins County Progressives have been the most vocal group in their support of closing the power plant. Even the county Democrats have voted for no natural gas. I'm just reading the question. Do you support repowering with natural gas or not?
I do support repowering with natural gas. Unfortunately, it is too expensive. Public Service Commission reviewed this. It was over $100 million. It would be on each of our rate-paying bills. So I think what's more realistic is to have a kind of hybrid plan. They are thankfully going towards solar. I was working with the power plant to site the school district solar panels there through 2 different iterations. I explored 7 different sites throughout Lansing for that particular project. But they eventually went to fund their own solar plant, which will be, I think, the 2nd largest in New York State. So I do support repowering, but I don't think it's economically feasible. And I think we do have to look for a mixture of all of the above set of options to keep our homes lit up, but also to keep our planet safe in terms of the environment.
I think this is interesting because this is actually how you can conflate 2 issues and kind of work your way to a different answer than the direct answer. I mean, the direct answer is, I believe the power plant should be repowered. I've always thought this. Now, we have a new owner there. We were able to keep that power plant alive until somebody said, hey, you know what? I can make money at that power plant. I'm going to come in and buy that. That new company has decided, listen, we're going to build 18 megawatts of solar out here, but we would also like to repower. How are they going to do that? It's not going to be on the ratepayers. They're saying that, yes, you know what, if we were to run a pipeline to this plant, we would pay for that. So that's not going to be on you. That's going to be on them. But even the solar, this is what I mean by the conflation of issues, is even the solar out there, it is not going to be like I can go and buy into that. It's not community solar. They're going to be selling that power at market. So it's a different issue. But yes, I've always believed this. And when this plant was threatened with closure, I went out and I did billboards. We put those up. Then we also bought radio time. I mean, we were invested in saving this plant.
I'll just remind people that Mike does work for a billboard company, so that was not such a huge stretch.
Good point.
But I do believe that it's magical thinking to think that that power plant can get repowered by the present owners. Those present owners bought it out of bankruptcy. I believe that one of the key reasons, there was a huge gamble on their part. I have not talked to the owners myself, but I think that they're looking for the tax credits and possibly change in administration or priority regarding gas in New York State. So I do not think that repowering for gas is actually realistic.
I guess we'll see. I mean, I do not run power companies. I do talk with them about every week, maybe every 2 weeks. They are confident that they are moving forward. They are putting this solar in place, and they believe that they will also hopefully be able to repower. But, you know, I wish we had done it 10 years ago, because now the rules on coal are changing, and I don't know what kind of impact that's going to have. But again, it's the sacrifice of the good for the perfect, and I really, this new company, they are committed. They would like to go forward and keep this plant alive, and I appreciate that. Oh, and no park billboards were used for that. Little baby billboards.
This one to Mike Sigler. If you're so sure that shaft number 4 will have no environmental impact, why do you keep telling people that an environmental impact statement would close the mine?
No, because I believe that the people that are calling for an environmental impact statement are using it as a stall tactic. They know that if they can stall this out, then it's just simply not going to happen. Listen, I went to the clean meeting. You know, I went to the clean meeting. Michael was there setting up food and setting up the chairs, and then his family was introducing the speakers. And I was there when Walter Hang said to everybody in that group, how many people here don't think there should be any mining underneath the lake? And 99% of the people in that room said, yes, no, we don't think there should be any mining. And that's without any information at all. That's just Walter Hang saying, hey, listen, I want to rally the troops, and this is going to be my issue du jour, because that's what he does. And I'm sorry, the DEC is very well respected. You cannot tell me that the New York State DEC, somehow the scientists there have been bought off or have somehow been corrupted into passing this shaft and saying, oh yeah, that's all right, we're just going to do that. You know, don't worry about the risks. I mean, I don't understand where that's coming from. I've been down in the mine, I've been down there with other people. I believe the DEC scientists.
I think it's great that Michael believes the DEC scientists, but I'll just remind you that Michael responded to someone else setting up that meeting. There were actually 2 meetings. My wife and I called a meeting in the Lansing Library because we had not gotten any information from the salt mine leadership, although I had been in touch with them very regularly over many, many years, about every 6 months, saying, when is the community forum going to happen? When are you going to get information out about what's happening with the shaft? We finally said, let's get the neighbors together. Maybe 15 or 20 people will come. 60 people came, and in the second meeting, over 100 people came. Someone set that meeting up. Someone asked that science to be divulged, and Mike attended, and now he's become a geologist. That's wonderful news, but let me explain to you that we have different kinds of science being between DEC and between people who presented those kinds of meetings. My father was on the EPA Science Advisory Board. He chaired it. He wrote a report called Relative Risk Analysis. How can we actually balance health risks, environmental risks, and I think this is a perfect example of how we have to follow the science. Rebuttals?
I don't pretend to be a scientist. I go to the scientists. That's who I get my information from. And just a few moments ago, at the very beginning, my opponent said, oh, you know, I'm very close. Even in his literature, he says, oh, I'm very close to Cargill. I did all this work for them, and I supported them from the beginning, and yet now, oh no, I don't talk to them at all. And now is really the critical time to be talking to them. When this permit was going through, you know, why not talk to them? I mean, I have towns voting on things, and they haven't even called the mine. And I'm sorry, the mine is pretty open about what they want to do.
What is your position on the clean Article 78 lawsuit against the DEC, and why? Is an Article 78 proceeding technically a lawsuit?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Yes. Okay. Then what is your position on it and why?
I'm personally not in favor of an Article 78. My family was asked to participate, and I said no. I don't think that's the way to go. I will take issue with Michael characterizing that I have not been in touch with the mine manager. I've been in touch with Russ Gibbons when he was mine manager, and Sean Wazinski, through email, through meeting in our living room. We had 18 points when the shaft was first proposed that we had concern about. They met our concerns. So I don't think necessarily going to court is the best way to proceed. I think there are rational ways to proceed that we don't have to go through that. The mine can stay open, and we can actually, again, have a public hearing or whatever is needed to share the data, share the science, so that the public is informed and the mine is kept safe. And I really believe in that shaft to promote safety, to promote ventilation, and to keep that mine going for another 100 years.
I'm literally quoting you from 15 minutes ago. So it's not like this is, you literally just said that you hadn't been in touch with the mine in quite some time. So an Article 78 is very specific, it's very narrow in what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to say that basically suing the DEC. So Cargill's not really even a party to it. It's, you're suing this DEC and you're saying to the DEC, hey, you did this wrong. You went over, you did not perform your due diligence. I do not find that to be the case. I again find this to be a stall tactic. There are people that are participating in this Article 78 who, frankly, are not even parties to the case. I mean, they're not, you might as well sue New York City for certain things under an Article 78 if you're living in some of these towns that are participating in this. So it's curious that, this is like the last ditch that they're trying to do, but it's important. It shows that, there are a group of people that they say, no, if the DEC says this, we'll believe it. Well, no, clearly they won't.
Yeah, we are all parties to this case in a certain sense. We all enjoy that lake. We want to preserve the lake. We also want to preserve mine safety. We want to preserve the longevity of being able to get salt on our roads. Steve Engelbright, who's chair of the Environmental and Conservation Committee in New York State, when he got some of the information that was presented at the SALT forum that Mike's referred to, wanted to hold a public hearing. It's a perfectly legitimate thing for a chair to be asking for, and I hope we have that going forward.
Can I rebut that again? Or is that outside the rules?
Did you rebut already?
Yes, you did.
No, I mean, the original question was the Siegler. Then he responded. Then Siegler gave another speech, and he gave a short response.
Okay.
Okay.
So there's
That's fine.
2 rounds already.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Or Mike.
I don't need a mic.
Okay, Sigler is next. So this one was addressed to Mike Sigler. To paraphrase your Ithaca Journal article of August 9th, 2017.
About what? I'm sorry.
August 9th.
Did I ask this already?
No.
Okay. Included with your campaign literature, you listen to, understand, and that you're flexible enough to change your mind after hearing a better argument. Why is it a positive for you to change your mind after being educated, but not for your opponent, Mr. Kaplinka-Lair? He had initially supported the Cargill expansion. Many of us have heard him register his early support of the expansion. It's my understanding he now opposes it on several grounds, including the lack of an EIS.
Well, apparently that's not the case, but the question is incorrect. Apparently Michael still does support the mine. It isn't, by the way, it's not an expansion either, so I'm going to take this back to the beginning. Back in 2002, the mine did ask to have their permit expanded so that they could make the mine, the footprint larger, and nobody said anything. Nobody said boo. So yes, they were given the permit to expand the mine. This shaft is literally just to get the miners closer to the work site and to bring in fresh air. If you're ever down in the mine, the whole thing is basically a giant, it's all about ventilation. It's all about getting air 7 miles underground and getting it to where the workers are so that they're safe. God forbid one of these guys has just a medical condition, whereas you have to get them out of the mine. That's a 45-minute trip from where the work site is to get just to the bottom of the shaft where you can get these people out. So yes, I mean, listen, we need this shaft immediately, and I don't understand why we would slow that down.
I want to be clear, I'm not opposing the shaft. I am asking for environmental review. The shaft has already been permitted. In terms of where the mine should be extended to, whether it's under the lake or under the land, I think is an open question. And again, we have a difference in science, and I think we should have more environmental information shared with the public and shared with the policymakers. So it's never had an environmental impact statement, full EIS, since it has been founded.
So rebuttal?
Yes.
So what happened back in 2002 was basically, according to the mine, the equivalent of an EIS. They did the mine stability, they have DEAC down there every single year, and they have third-party consultants that come in and check out the mine stability. But as for what you just said about supporting the mine, I mean, it's in the question. I mean, I'm not saying that. The person that was asking the question seemed to think that you were against it. So it's not Mike Sigler saying that. I don't know who asked that question, but they are clearly misinformed.
There's a lot of nuance with this, but I think it's very important for people to understand that I'm not against the shaft. I'm for environmental regulations to be reviewed, and I think that we have to get more information out to the public.
And in the same area, moving from underground to above ground, Lansing residents are worried about increased taxes if the power plant closes. Do you both support the energy park? And if so, what are their specific plans and how can they help the tax base?
I support the energy park for sure. I was, again, one of the people who was proposing solar on that land, and thankfully the power plant itself has decided to put a much larger solar array there. It's interesting that when I was proposing the schools locate their solar array on Cargill land, Cargill said yes initially, and then said, we actually want to reserve the right to have a large solar array on our land to help with our electricity bill in the future. So I think these initiatives that people can explore often turn out to be a boon for taxpayers in larger ways. Will that particular, quote, energy park offset the decreasing tax value? Not completely. But thankfully we do have a new building in a different part of the town that is offsetting that, and I think that we can continue that kind of development. If you look at the recent summary of different economic development across Tompkins County, it's close to $500 million of economic development happening in Tompkins County, some of which is happening in Lansing, which will assist with our tax base.
I'm going to go with two things. I mean, so when the power plant was bought, they decided to put this solar in. There were very few people that were called to actually speak at this thing. So, I was called up, they asked me to speak, and I talked about how important it was that these people were doing this, that this company is coming in and putting in this solar. There are 70 jobs up there. There are people that rely on this power plant, and they don't want to see it closed. And I'm telling you, I've seen power plants close, like down in Elmira, where they just sit. They sit and they rot, and that is it. But in this case, we have a new lease on life. We have an opportunity with this solar to just keep the lines alive, and then hopefully with power and preserve those 70 jobs. If you're talking about development, though, I would like to see a new natural gas line run up by the airport. We have dumped millions of dollars into the airport area, into the road, into the sewer, so that we can have industry up there like Borg Warner. It is very difficult to run a business. Ask any restaurant owner if he can run a business without natural gas or propane. And believe me, they'd rather have natural gas because the people in Lansing are spending 3 times what they have to heat their homes without natural gas.
Over, Bud. I appreciate, Mike, that you went to a press conference. I think it's a completely different thing to be able to move an agenda item from start to finish. The idea of putting in a solar park, you probably are aware that Lansing schools went through 4 years of trying to put in solar arrays. It takes a lot of details. I investigated 7 different sites. I'm just trying to give that as an example of showing it up at a press conference and actually working through the issues with all the different partners are 2 completely different things. I'm glad you were invited. I'm glad you spoke in favor of it. And I don't think indeed that the tax value is in the range that you're speaking about.
And the finish to everything you just talked about that you had done is no. It didn't happen. It didn't go through because at the end of the day, the numbers did not work out. So yes, why was I invited to actually speak at this thing? Because the power plant knew how involved I was with the whole instrumentation of it. I'm sorry, some of these projects actually do need vocal support. And at the end of the day, Mike, I guess you did put in a lot of work that you were paid for. It wasn't like you did that work for free, to my knowledge. And at the end of the day, these things didn't happen. And that was a communications failure, I believe.
Has either candidate ever read the New York State Constitution, which, as an office holder in New York, you have sworn to uphold? That was my reaction.
Who's first? I'm forgetting.
Mike Sigler.
I believe this question is probably forward into the idea that we're going to do a constitutional convention. I'm glad Hank DeLay isn't here. He's piping in at this point. I am not a big supporter of the constitutional convention going forward. In part because I can't imagine that the state has gotten more conservative in the past 50 years. So that might be a selfish reason. But something really scary happened, actually. And a lot of people say this isn't what's going to happen. But in New York City, they have decided, or they're deciding, to actually tap into their pension fund to pay for affordable housing. That is just a disaster. That should scare you. The one thing New York State has done well is to fully fund its pension. Back in 2008 and 2009, the state was on the rocks. They said to the counties, listen, you're going to have to put in more money. 22%, 23%. I mean, the increases were pretty big. But they said, you know what, we're going to bite this bullet because we don't want to be like Illinois. We don't want to be like California. And that's something we did well, so I don't want to jeopardize that.
I have looked at the New York State Constitution when I have applicable reason to look at it. For instance, the Constitutional Convention issue. There is a section in the Constitution about how often that should happen and what the rules are. And I was actually asked, do I support it or not? And I had to go look. How will delegates be chosen? 3% a district, and how will delegates be replaced, and all that kind of thing. There's a section in there about affordable housing. There's actually a section in there about what Mike just spoke about in terms of retirement benefits will not be diminished or impaired. But have I read the entire thing? No. I go to it when there's specific issues. We actually have a possibility of some land over, Bell Station land near the power plant. There's a section in it about forest preserves being kept forever wild. As issues come up, the Constitution does actually inform us. And I think you may be surprised to know that the Constitution includes the right to organize and bargain collectively. It's kind of like in our Bill of Rights, Article 1. So I think that there are times when it's necessary to look at it. I have not read the entire thing, but I go to it when I need to.
No, we're good.
Okay. I'm going to take this one next, just to get it over with for my failing eyesight, because it's small print, it's hard to read. So, Michael Winkler is next, so I'm not going to read this one next. I'll read this one next. The town was in line for a $24,000 grant, and it lost it. This is to Mike Winkler. It lost it because you said you made an error and said the mistake was on you. What happened there?
I do not know what you're referring to. I think I can refer to the grants that I have gotten for the town of Lansing. I initially got a grant to look at an energy audit. That was about $14,000. We did an energy audit, then we got another grant from NYSERDA to implement those energy savings measures in the town barns, in the town hall, and in this building. That initial grant was $75,000 to do that work, and we got an additional $10,000 later on because other people in the state weren't using their grant money for that purpose. We got some extra money. Literally, Lynn Day was in the basement of this building with some of that money, insulating, etc. In terms of filing for reimbursement, there was a need to document every single expenditure being American-made. And I went through every single bill, and we were probably able to document between 95 and 98%. So was the grant completely reimbursed? No, but when we moved from 75 to 85,000, and we didn't quite get 100% reimbursement, I still think we came out ahead, and we had $15,000 a year in savings because of it.
Mike?
I have.
Okay. Now for the challenge to my eyesight. This person says, to Mr. Sigler, I don't feel you answered the question about the math involved in saying there would be a smaller carbon footprint from hauling salt in for Lansing's roads than from hauling salt out to all the other towns throughout the state. I understand that the economics of this situation is another story, but can you not admit that the carbon footprint would not be greater if there were trucks only coming in as opposed to the number of trucks involved with the current distribution of locally mined salt?
Oh, I think this is a pervasive problem in Tompkins County, where they don't particularly mind pollution as long as it's not in Tompkins County. They don't mind if, well, we're going to mine the salt over here and truck it in, but we don't want the mine here. We don't mind getting our power.
You're not answering the question.
I am answering the question. You don't mind getting your power from natural gas in Pennsylvania or Canada, but you don't want the power coming from the power plant that's here providing 70 jobs and $1.3 million to your school district. I have a problem with that. I have a problem with an ideology that says, we just don't want to see it. And yes, the carbon footprint is less for us right here because we don't have to truck it in from far away. Will those other areas have larger carbon footprints because they have to truck it in? Sure. But those other counties can open their own salt mine and then they can lower their carbon footprint and produce their things locally.
Michael?
I don't mean to rebut the carbon footprint question.
This one says, Peter Stein, Irene Stein's husband, and Irene was the chairman.
Do you have this thing on? It's hard
I
to
can't hear you back here.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Oh, it's better.
No? Is this better? Yeah. All right. Now I feel bad. This questioner says, Peter Stein. Oops. Yeah, that's why. Said that you had lost the trust of people in your own party, and when you were chair, many Democrats called on you to resign, and Stein even ran against you to get you out. What's changed since then, besides moving to a different district?
Well, Peter Stein, I don't believe, said I lost the trust of my party, but there were Democrats at the time who were very ambitious. I was elected as chair of the legislature. There was a disagreement about vice chair of the legislature. And at the time when the vice chair was eventually chosen, someone on the legislature vowed to run a candidate against me. That particular person went through 3 different candidates who would not run against me. They finally found Peter Stein, who was the husband of the chair of the Tompkins County Democratic Committee. Unfortunately, at the very end of that campaign, I believe 6 legislators signed a letter and they put it on car windshields, and that race was won by Peter Stein by 6 votes. I don't think that's a proper way to run an election, and I think that there may be issues in terms of the Tompkins County Legislature that need to be addressed. I think that many of them have been addressed before I even decided to run. I went to every single Tompkins County legislator to meet with them, to ask, are there any issues that we need to talk about? And I got plenty of blessing to go forward.
Mike?
I mean, I read the articles during that campaign. I thought they were very interesting. I mean, I remember Peter Stein did say that. I believe it was, I don't know, it was either in the Ithaca Journal or in Tompkins Weekly. It certainly was not a great experience living through all that. We did not know. We were not, we don't go to the Democratic caucuses about what was going on behind the scenes, but certainly there was an air of dysfunction at the county legislature. And, I talk to people now. Jim Dennis has come out and supported me, which I was surprised at. He's leaving the legislature, unfortunately, but I believe trust is important, and once you lose that trust, it's very hard to get it back.
Just a quick rebuttal. I think 4 out of 6 of those people who signed that letter regret it. They were, in my estimation, influenced by someone who was overly ambitious.
Okay, this one directed at Mike Sigler. It's the same person, so it starts with also.
All right.
I believe you're on record as supporting fracking. If the state ban on fracking were reversed, does the enormous number of trucks used in the process of high-volume hydrofracking not concern you?
I don't believe I am on the record as supporting fracking. However, in the Finger Lakes, we are a very fragile, I believe, ecosystem. I don't believe that fracking would be appropriate in this area. Chemung County and Steuben County, they believe that they can do it safely, but there's a ban statewide, so it's simply not going to happen here. I will say there's an awful lot of people who are using gas right now down in downtown Ithaca who are against fracking, and yet they are benefiting from that fracked gas. They are saving money that other people who do not have access to gas at all, they're living off the fruits. The whole Ithaca Commons is heated off of natural gas, which is all fracked gas. And yet I've got people here in Lansing who are living in trailers, and some are very nice trailers, some are not very nice trailers. And they have to pay 3 times what you do for natural gas using propane, and propane, a gas, or heating oil. So,
Michael?
I appreciate that Michael opposes fracking, and I appreciate that New York State actually took a long time to decide and then decided to not allow fracking in New York State. We've learned a lot from Pennsylvania in terms of some of the environmental impacts, and I think many of the communities in Pennsylvania where fracking did go forward full bore are seeing really unfortunate negative consequences in their economy, in terms of boom and bust, in terms of environment, and in terms of the kinds of consequences, I'll say, of the fracking industry in their communities.
The Lansing Ag Plan's lead writer expressed the belief that nobody else lives or deserves to live in North Lansing but farmers. Do you refute this policy statement, and what will you do to meet the special needs of 90% of the rural residents who are living within Lansing's newly created agricultural zone but are not involved in farming? And it's Michael Kupler-Galaire.
I support the Ag Plan. I don't quite understand the statement about only those who are north of Perugal Road, for instance, are for farming. I think that there's so much about Lansing that we all enjoy and we appreciate. We want to preserve those kinds of quality of life issues. And I have no opposition to people being able to use their land as they wish. I certainly do support the Ag Plan and keeping Lansing a right to farm community.
I've actually never heard that we didn't want any building up in North Lansing. I mean, there's going to be some, but yes, they would like to keep, this is really a town issue again, this is really not a county issue, but I'll speak on it. The town would like to, apparently, and this is what I've heard for the last 20 years, is that the town of Lansing would like to keep the development south of Perugal Road. And they would like to keep the farming and the open spaces up in North Lansing. Frankly, a lot of the land north of Peruville Road is too valuable to build on. I mean, we have people there, I mean, it was going for, at some point, I think $6,000 an acre, $8,000 an acre. And the rentals right now, I mean, I live on the old Armstrong farm, which is right on Peruville Road. I only own 3 acres. All the other stuff is owned by somebody else. But they rent that out every year. And right now there's corn. And, you know, that's all going local too. From my understanding, it's going to a local dairy. So, you know, if the land is that valuable, I'm hoping it stays that way. And I would like to see us stay a farm community. So, but I don't think that people are against, you know, building houses on Buck Road, for example.
Any thoughts? You've both been on the legislature. Which committees did you chair on the legislature, and how did you distinguish yourself on those committees from other legislators? Let's start with, like Sid.
Okay, so I've been on every committee that's on the legislature. Right now, I'm the vice chair of the budget committee. I believe the number one reason that legislators kind of get along with me is because I put it all out on the table. Right now, Martha Robertson, she is pushing to do some kind of housing fund. And she wrote about it. And I wrote her back and said, these are my concerns about this. She is never going to be blindsided by me about where I stand. Right? Legislators simply on the legislature are not blindsided by me. I tell them my problems with a certain issue, and you know, they can adjust, or they can say, you know what, Sigler doesn't, you know, I don't need his vote. I hope they don't do that. I hope that they adjust, and most legislatures, frankly, do that. They do take into consideration what you say, because they want bigger buy-in. Because some of these things are big, and they need buy-in from the other side. And they know that if they don't, it's going to cause a problem later on. So that's, I think, the number one thing I bring to the legislature, is that I give that kind of open, and I tell you what I think.
As I mentioned earlier, I was chair of some standing committee on the legislature for 11 out of 12 years. 5 of those years I chaired government operations. 4 of those years I chaired budget committee. 2 of those years I chaired the legislature in its entirety. In terms of how I distinguish myself, I would say probably over those 11 years I moved forward at least 250 resolutions in terms of policy, in terms of budgets. And I think it's important for people to understand that even when I was chair of the legislature, where you have the opportunity to appoint committee chairs, I appointed the most capable people, regardless of party. Mike Hattery was the most capable person for a certain committee. He's Republican. I appointed him, much to the chagrin of some of my Democratic colleagues. But I went across the aisle to choose the best person available. That's how I operate, and I want the best in terms of the common good for Lansing as well.
Lansing has a lot of economic diversity, with some residents living very comfortably and some folks who are really struggling. How would you deal with this disparity in your approach to representation?
Who's it to?
It's Michael's first.
Which one?
Well, I've been calling you Michael in my head.
One of my first jobs out of college, and I was really excited to have this, was to work as a DSS caseworker. So I've been in many, many homes. I was doing what's called preventive services, trying to prevent children from being put into foster care. So I've seen all kinds of background. I've also been on the Chamber of Commerce board, for instance, and worked hand in hand with people who come from backgrounds that have more means. So I have experience. I have worked with people from all across the spectrum, all across the community. So I think that I have both the experience, but I also have the ability to listen. You know, I've gone to every single road and almost every single house in Lansing who has a voter in it, and I think I've been able to appeal to stand on that doorstep and listen to anyone from any background about what their concerns are, and bring it back into my campaign and into my knowledge base, so to speak, for whatever, however, who represent Lansing going forward.
Mike?
So, lived here a long time. Not a long time. Sorry. But I have seen my daughter go up through the schools. And I think the number one thing that Lansing brings that other places do not is the school district. And if you really want to lift people up, that's how you do it. I mean, I go to swim meets where I don't know how well off the kids are. Some kids are poor, some kids are rich. But this town, there's something about it that I really see a melding, whereas at the end of the day, that kid will be better off going into the future. And so when we talk about schools and protecting our schools, I mean, the story came out, I don't know, probably 2 months ago, that our taxes here are high on schools. But the people here, they seem willing to pay for it because they understand that if we can get these kids on a road, that's their lifeline out of poverty. Now, with that said, you know, people want to live here, and we have to understand that. And when I first moved here, there were not very many houses in the $150,000 zone. And perhaps that's something we really need to look at, and that's something the whole county is looking at right now, is the housing project.
Just in terms of rebuttal, other kinds of background that I bring to this, I would say, kind of disparity or ability to relate to people from all walks of life. So I have worked for Rescue Mission, which was working with homeless men particularly. I've worked at the Learning Web, which worked with youth and also worked with homeless youth. I was on the Rec Partnership, which made collaborations for young people all across the community. And I've worked on transportation committees to try to bring greater transportation access to a lot of these activities here in Lansing, and will continue to do so.
Okay. I think I have time for one more question before the closing statements. So I'm going to combine 2 questions and get an extra one in there. Can you highlight the 3 major differences between you and your opponent, and what positive trait or traits do you see in your opponent? And start with Mike Sigler.
I don't know if I can fit 3 things into a minute, but let's try this out. I think the major difference between my opponent and myself is, you know, earlier on somebody said, are you endorsed by Sheriff Ken Lansing? And yet I just got a mail piece, or I didn't get it, somebody else got it and gave it to me. And it said, you know, it said endorsements, boom. And then it said, you know, testimonials. And there's Ken Lansing's name. And I called Ken and I said, well, Ken, I'm not upset really, I'm more surprised. We just talked like literally 3 months ago about the race. And he's like, yeah, no, I told Michael Pincolaire that no, I was not endorsing anybody in this race. But it gives the impression of that. And that's a problem. I mean, I don't understand how you get there. Whereas you can say one thing and then not do the other. Now, to Mike's credit, you know, he has 4 children. And they all seem well on their path to adulthood. And I see pictures of him and his family at weddings and things like that, and they seem to really love each other and have a great family. So I hope to have such a loving family.
In terms of what I appreciate about Mike Sigler, I think he has an excellent sense of humor. I think he keeps very abreast of the news cycle, which is he's able to bring information very appropriately to the floor. I don't think he actually you know, holds grudges. I think he is transparent in terms of his opinion, and if he gets a difference of opinion, he doesn't hold it against people. In terms of the 3 major differences, I think that one of the key differences is how I have actually already brought results, as opposed to just using press conferences or, you know, making claims without actually following through and actually delivering the details to make things move forward. I think I would be able to continue to do that. I think I stand on my record. I think most of the things we've said tonight are documentable, and people can go back into the record and see what I have accomplished and would continue to accomplish if I'm elected to represent you.
Okay. Before the closing statements, I want to say thank you again for submitting these questions, and pardon my stumbling reading through them. I apologize if your question wasn't read. I tried to take at least one from each topic, and hopefully we had a wide forum. I think Michael Kaplinkalair will do the first closing statement, because Mike Sigler did the first opening statement. Is that agreeable? Sure. 2 minutes.
Thank you all again for being here tonight. I think tonight has shown that Lansing residents actually have a very clear choice. Past performance is the best predictor of future results. I hope you've heard tonight examples of results that I have already brought to Lansing and how uniquely qualified I am given my background. No other candidate has worked both as a county employee for 5 years and supervised department heads essentially and given them direction and been on hiring committees for department heads. No other candidate before you has negotiated contracts for employees' unions and then negotiated contracts for the county on the management side. No other candidate has, as I mentioned before, chaired committees for 11 out of 12 years and certain special committees. I have 35 years of building relationships with community leaders and grassroots employees and across all kinds of sectors. I've served on the boards of IDA, Industrial Development Agency, the Chamber of Commerce, TST BOCES, which is representing Lansing. I've brought results to you across town committees in terms of Economic Development Committee, Community Council, Bicentennial Committee. These are results that are available to you. My experience is here to serve you, and I ask for your vote. One question, though, has not been answered tonight, and that's the most important question of all. How will you vote? Ed Levine likes to say that running for office is kind of like an extended job application with 5,200 interviewers. I think that from the experience and my record of results, your choice will be clear at that ballot box. I believe the outcome is in your hands. I humbly ask for your vote tonight, since it all comes down to you. When you stand before that ballot, I ask you to pause, think about what you've heard tonight, think about what you've seen and heard on your doorstep, and who might be the best representative for the interests of all Lansing. That will be the moment of truth, and I hope tonight and those door conversations have been the moment of proof. Thank you very much.
So again, I want to thank you all for coming. I think this has been a great forum. I'm going to tell you a couple little stories. I think you'll live a place long enough and you actually do become a part of the place. And I wrote about this, and I truly believe that I've been on every street at some point through my career here. And I've seen how every sector of the society lives here in Lansing. And I'm proud to be a part of it. I'm proud to be a part of the Lansing school system, and I'm proud of the town. I went, and I'm going to tell you why some of these issues resonate with people too. You know, I gave some money to this person, and then they had a little celebration. And there's a guy there, and we're chit-chatting, and he says, "Oh, you're Mike Sidler." I said, "Yes." And, I see all your signs, and I really want to I want to come over there and hug you. I said, "All right." The guy, turns out, he works in the salt mine, and he knows that what I've been doing and trying to do for him, and he wants somebody just to go to bat for him, and he's feeling left out in the cold. He's looking at his assemblywoman and saying she couldn't even go and come to Lansing and do this speech from Myers Park, where you literally got the mine right behind you. But no, we're going to do it down at Stewart Park. It's those kind of relationships. Oh, by the way, the guy did come over to hug me. So. But it's those kind of relationships that you form, and those are the ties that bind. And that's the kind of legislator I want to be for you. I want to live in a town where you are looking out for each other's kids, and you are saying, "Hey, you know what, this may not be going so well over here." I mean, right now, I'm talking to the town board, and I'm talking to the planning board and saying, there is some concern about this new housing development going up. And there's some traffic concerns about the other housing development going up. And listen, we're worried about our kids on this street. Myers Road was getting pretty fast, and there were a lot of kids, and that was communicated. And then, the town took care of it. I think that right now we have a good synergy between the county and the town. I'm letting them know what's going on. They're letting me know what's going on. What can we do? And that's what I'd like to continue to do, is to keep that synergy going.
Thank you. Mike? Michael?
Thank
Or
you,
Michael
Dan.
and Mike? Thanks to all of you for participating in great questions.
And sit down and be nervous.